I can't marry you anymore, David. I've found someone else. He can give me the life I want.
Her voice was calm, too calm. Not angry, not confused, decided. David froze in the small living room where they were planning their wedding just days away. The wedding list was still on the table. The invitation cards were half printed. Amaka, what are you saying? His voice cracked. She didn't look at him for long. I found someone else. He can give me the life I want. Silence. Then the sound of his world breaking. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 1. To everything there is a season. But in that moment, David didn't understand the season he had entered. David was a humble music minister in Lagos. Not famous, not rich, not connected to any powerful circle in the church or outside it. Just a simple young man trying to serve God with everything he had. But there was something about him, something people couldn't easily explain. Every Sunday, when he stepped into that small church and lifted his voice in worship, the atmosphere always shifted. It wasn't about talent alone. It felt deeper than that, like peace itself walked into the room whenever he began to sing. People didn't just hear him, they felt something. Something that made their eyes close without thinking. Something that made heavy hearts suddenly feel light again. David himself never understood it. He would just stand there, holding his old guitar, eyes sometimes closed, lost in worship like nothing else in the world existed. He lived a very simple life, a small, crowded room in a busy part of Lagos where noise never really ended. Honking cars, shouting neighbors, distant street vendors calling out late into the night. But inside that small room, David had his own quiet world. A worn-out Bible that had seen better days, a guitar with strings that were slightly old but still carried his songs, and a heart that belonged completely to worship. Psalm 34:18 said, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." And in those days, David wasn't broken. Not yet. Life hadn't tested him deeply enough to shake his faith. He believed everything still made sense. He believed goodness would always follow him. He believed love, especially, would be simple. Because Amaka was his world. Beautiful, ambitious, always dreaming bigger than the small spaces they both came from. When she walked into a room, people noticed, not just because of how she looked, but because of how she carried herself, like she was already stepping into a future far beyond where she was. They met during choir practice in church, just two young people serving in different ways, slowly drawn to each other without even realizing it. At first, it was small conversations, then shared laughter after rehearsals, then long talks that stretched beyond time, as if the world outside didn't matter. She used to look at him during practice and say softly, almost like she was discovering something new every time, "David, your voice feels like heaven." And every time she said it, something inside David would melt, like those words were confirmation that maybe, just maybe, God had already written her into his story. So David believed love would be enough. Even when life didn't look perfect, even when they didn't have much, even when the future was unclear, he held on to that belief like a promise from God. His friend Kunle wasn't always convinced. Kunle had seen more of life, more of its delays and disappointments. One evening, after rehearsal, as they walked slowly down the quiet church compound, Kunle finally said it out loud. "David, love is sweet, but life is hard. Make sure she can wait." David only smiled, a calm, confident smile, like someone who believed nothing could shake what he had found. "If God gave her to me, she will stay." He meant it with all his heart. Proverbs 3:5 echoed somewhere deep within him. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And David did trust, fully, completely. without doubt. But life has a way of testing even the strongest faith. Because sometimes trust is not tested in moments of blessing, it is tested when delay enters the story.
The pressure started slowly, almost quietly, like a small weight that didn't seem important at first. But over time, it began to grow. Amaka started noticing it in little things, in the way her friends would post wedding photos online, smiling beside wealthy men in expensive suits, in the way their lives seemed to be moving forward while hers felt stuck in the same place. At home, it was no different. The questions kept coming again and again. Her family, especially the older ones, would ask with that same familiar tone, "So, when is this musician coming to see us properly?" Each time she heard it, something inside her tightened. She would force a small smile, but deep down, she was tired. Tired of waiting, tired of explaining, tired of believing in something that had no clear timeline. Then one evening came, the moment everything started to shift. Her voice was softer than usual, but there was something different in it, something final. "David, I can't keep waiting like this." The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. "We don't even know when your ministry will take off," she added, her eyes avoiding his. David sat still for a moment, like he was trying to understand if he heard her correctly. He reached for her hands gently, holding them like he was trying to hold the relationship itself together. "God is not finished with me yet," he said quietly, not in anger, but in faith, in hope, like he was still holding on to something unseen. But Amaka pulled her hands away. Not violently, but firmly, like she had already made her mind long before that conversation began. And in that moment, David felt something shift, something he couldn't explain. Proverbs 13:12. Hope deferred makes the heart sick. That verse didn't just stay in scripture anymore. It started to live inside their relationship. Every unanswered question, every delay, every silent prayer, it all began to weigh heavier than before. Days turned to distance, until one day, everything changed completely. She stopped answering his calls, stopped showing up at choir. The places where her presence used to feel warm and familiar suddenly felt empty, unfamiliar, almost painful. And then David heard the rumor. At first, he didn't want to believe it. He told himself it couldn't be true. Not Amaka, not after everything they had shared, not after all the prayers, the songs, the plans. But the truth has a way of finding its way into your ears, even when your heart is not ready. She had met someone else, a businessman, stable, wealthy, ready. Everything David was not, at least not yet. And she said yes. She accepted his proposal. When David heard it, he didn't cry, he didn't shout, he didn't even move at first. He just sat there quietly, like something inside him had broken, but there were no visible pieces left to pick up. The room felt colder than usual. Even the silence felt heavier. Psalm 147 verse 3, He heals the brokenhearted. But in that moment, healing didn't feel like comfort. It didn't feel like hope. It felt like emptiness, like something had been taken out and left a space that nothing could immediately fill. And David slowly began to understand. Sometimes the beginning of healing still feels like breaking.
After the breakup, David didn't give himself time to heal. He buried himself in ministry. He told himself it was for God, but deep down, it was the only way he knew how to survive the pain. Every song he sang carried a piece of his heartbreak. Every prayer felt like he was trying to breathe again. Worship became his therapy. The altar became the only place he could cry without being questioned. Slowly, things started to change. One small invitation came, then another. A church here, a program there. At first, it felt random, but before long, people started recognizing his voice. Who is that guy? There's something different about him. His songs began to spread across churches.
People started inviting him to minister beyond his circle. From the outside, it looked like a breakthrough, like God was finally lifting him. But inside, David was still bleeding, still carrying questions he hadn't answered, still fighting emotions he didn't understand. He would smile on stage, lift his hands in worship, but the moment he stepped down, the silence returned. The emptiness followed him home. He kept holding on to the promise. All things work together for good. He repeated it like a lifeline, like if he said it enough, maybe it would become real. Then one day, something new happened. An invitation came from outside Lagos. It caught him off guard. Then another came. Then another. Each one bigger than the last. It felt like things were finally aligning. Like maybe, just maybe, this was his moment. Promotion, elevation, recognition, everything he had prayed for. But something didn't feel right. At first, he ignored it. He told himself, this is what you asked God for. But deep down, something strange had already started. Every time David prepared to minister, something followed him into the night. A weight, heavy, quiet, but impossible to ignore. It didn't show up during the day, not when people were around, not when the music was loud, only at night, when everything was still, when there was nowhere to hide. He would lie down, exhausted, but sleep never came easy. And when it finally did, the dreams started. He saw himself standing on empty stages, no audience, no sound, just silence, cold, uncomfortable silence. Then a voice would come, soft but piercing. You are still broken. He would wake up immediately, heart racing, body soaked in sweat, confused. What was that? He tried to pray it away, tried to ignore it, but it kept coming back, again and again. One night, it became too much. He couldn't pretend anymore, so he knelt down beside his bed. God, what is happening to me? His voice was tired, not the kind people hear on stage. This one was raw. He reached for his Bible, not planned, not calculated, just desperate. He opened it randomly, and his eyes fell on a familiar line. For I know the plans I have for you. He paused. Normally, that verse brought comfort, hope, peace. But this time, something felt different. Instead of calm, he felt tension, like two forces were pulling inside him, one whispering promise, the other reminding him of his pain. He sat there staring at the page. Why don't I feel peace? That was when it hit him. Destiny doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes it comes with resistance. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of a deeper battle. As David's ministry continued to grow, something else grew with it. Loneliness. At first, he didn't notice. He was too busy traveling, too busy preparing, too busy showing up for everyone else. But slowly, things began to shift. The calls reduced. The check-ins stopped. Friends who used to be close became distant. And the ones who remained, he found it harder to trust them. He didn't know why, but something inside him had changed. Or maybe something inside him had never healed. Then one day, an opportunity came. Big. The kind people pray for their entire lives. A major music label reached out. They had heard his songs, seen his growth. They wanted to sign him. For a moment, everything paused. Is this it?
This could change everything. The meeting went well, too well, until they said it, calmly, like it was nothing. Your sound is powerful, but we need you to adjust it. David frowned slightly. Adjust how? Reduce the gospel tone, make it more commercial. Silence. The words hung in the air. He felt it immediately, that discomfort again, that quiet warning. He didn't respond right away, but deep inside, he already knew his answer. Later that night, he sat with Kunle. Kunle looked at him, shaking his head. Do you even understand what you're about to lose? David stayed quiet. You are choosing struggle over success, Kunle added. The words hit hard, because part of him was afraid they were true. But David lifted his head slowly and said something he wasn't even sure he had the strength to live by. I am choosing obedience over applause. The room went silent. Kunle leaned back. You'll regret this. Maybe he would. Maybe he wouldn't. But in that moment, David knew he couldn't betray what he believed. We must obey God rather than men. It sounded strong when he said it, but the consequences came faster than he expected. The calls stopped. The invitations reduced. Doors that were opening started closing again. And this time, it hurt even more, because he had seen what was possible. Money became tight again. Bills started piling up, and the confidence he once had started to shake. One night, sitting alone in his room, he whispered, God. His voice cracked. Did I miss my moment? No answer. Just silence. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. And in that silence, everything he thought he understood began to fall apart.
One night, during one of his usual midnight prayers, something inside David finally broke. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. He had been on his knees for a while, praying the same prayers he had prayed for days, maybe weeks. His voice was tired, almost cracking, not loud anymore, just heavy. God, I don't understand. He paused. Something didn't feel right, but not in a bad way. It was different. Suddenly, a deep stillness filled the room. Not emptiness, but presence. David slowly lifted his head, his breathing shallow. He didn't hear a voice out loud, no thunder, no dramatic sign, but the thought came, clear, calm, unshakable. She didn't leave you because you were failing. She left because she couldn't carry your process. David froze. His heart skipped. What? He whispered under his breath. The words echoed in his mind again. Not harsh, not condemning, just truth. And somehow, that truth hurt more than anything else. His hands trembled as he reached for his Bible lying beside him. He didn't even know where to open, but he flipped it anyway. His eyes landed on a verse, Isaiah 60:22. He read it slowly, like someone trying to be sure they weren't imagining things. When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. David stopped. He read it again. This time, it hit deeper. The tears came instantly. Not the kind you fight, the kind that just fall. Because in that moment, he understood something he had been avoiding for so long. This wasn't just about heartbreak. This wasn't just about being left. It was about timing. It was about process. And most painfully, it was about people. He lowered his head, tears dropping onto the pages of his Bible. He thought she was part of it, he whispered. But deep down, he knew. Not everyone is assigned to your destiny journey. Some people walk with you at the beginning. They laugh with you, build with you, dream with you, but they are not meant to stay till the end. And that truth, it broke him. Because now he realized she wasn't taken from him.
She was never meant to go that far with him in the first place. And that night, on that quiet floor, with tears in his eyes and scripture in his hands, David began to see his story differently. That was when everything began to change.
Years passed. Not the kind of years that announce themselves loudly. No sudden breakthrough, no overnight fame. Just quiet growth, steady, consistent. David kept going. There were days it felt slow, days it felt unnoticed, but something deeper was happening, something real. His worship began to travel, first across cities, then across countries, until one day, his voice was no longer just local, it was global. People who had never met him, people who didn't even know his story, were singing songs that came from his pain, from his healing, from his walk with God. And still, he stayed the same, humble, grounded, careful not to lose himself in the noise, because he knew this wasn't about him. One night, after a powerful worship event in London, the crowd had been massive, the atmosphere intense, the kind where people cried, prayed, and felt something shift inside them. David gave everything on that stage. By the time he stepped off, he was exhausted, physically drained, but spiritually full. He walked backstage slowly, wiping sweat from his face, his heart still beating from the weight of the moment. That was when everything paused, because standing there, just a few steps ahead, was someone he never expected to see again. Amaka? He stopped. For a second, he wasn't sure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. She looked different, more polished, more put together. But something about her, something in her eyes, it didn't match. She looked tired, not physically, but deep inside. "Ama call, David," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost unsure, like she didn't even know if she had the right to call his name anymore. He turned slowly, no rush, no reaction, just calm. Silence filled the space between them, the kind of silence that carried years of memories, of love, of pain, of unanswered questions. "I heard your songs are everywhere now," she said quietly. He nodded. No pride, no excitement, just acknowledgement. She swallowed hard, her fingers fidgeting slightly, like she was holding back something heavy. "I made a mistake." Her voice broke. Tears began to gather in her eyes. "The man I left you for, it didn't work out." She paused, as if saying it out loud made it more real. "I thought I chose stability," she continued, her voice shaking, "but I lost peace." David didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, not with anger, not with bitterness, just understanding, but also distance. Something didn't feel the same anymore. After a moment, he spoke, softly. "You didn't lose me, Amaka." She looked up quickly, hope flickering for just a second, but then he continued. "You lost what God was building in me." That was when it hit. Not harsh, not loud, but deep. Because she could see it now. The man standing in front of her was not the same man she walked away from. Something had changed, something real. If anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The words weren't just scripture anymore. They were visible, alive, in him. A long silence followed. No one moved, no one spoke. Just the quiet weight of truth settling in. Then, softly, she asked the question that had been sitting in her heart the whole time. "Do you still think about me?" David looked at her, not with confusion, not with hesitation,
but with clarity. He shook his head slowly. Not the way you think. And in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't rejection. This wasn't revenge. This was something deeper. Healing had already happened.
Amaka left that night quietly. No shouting, no slammed doors, no drama. Just silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than words. David stood there, watching her walk away, trying to understand what had just happened. His chest felt tight, but deep down, somewhere he didn't want to admit, he knew. This wasn't anger. This wasn't a fight that could be fixed with apologies. This was realization. The kind that comes when your eyes finally open and you can't pretend anymore. Amaka didn't look back, not even once. And in that moment, David felt it. Some doors don't reopen. Not because of pride, not because someone is stubborn, but because something has changed. Something deep, something permanent. Transformation had happened. And once that happens, you can't go back to who you used to be. Days turned into weeks. The house felt different, quieter, emptier, but also strangely clearer. David began to reflect, to pray, to sit with himself in ways he never had before. He didn't fully understand it yet, but something inside him was shifting. That was when everything began to change. Then somewhere along the line, he met Esther. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't feel like something he had to chase. It felt calm. Esther was different. You could see it in the way she spoke, in the way she listened, in the way she carried peace like it was part of her. She was grounded in faith, not just in words, but in her life. Prayer wasn't something she performed. It was something she lived. And for the first time, David didn't feel pressure to prove anything. No rush, no expectations weighing him down, no fear that he would have to choose between love and his calling. Just understanding. The kind that doesn't try to change you, but supports who you are becoming. Sometimes they would sit in silence, and it felt complete. Other times they would talk about God, about purpose, about life, and it felt right. There was no confusion, no struggle, just peace. And slowly, David began to understand something he hadn't understood before. Proverbs 18 verse 22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing. Not just a partner, a good thing, a blessing. This time, love didn't compete with his purpose. It didn't distract him. It didn't pull him away from who he was called to be. This time, love stood beside it, supported it, strengthened it, and for the first time, everything made sense. If you're watching this right now, pause for a moment and really listen. There's a truth you need to hear. Maybe not later, maybe not tomorrow, but right now. Not every delay is denial. I know it doesn't always feel that way. When things don't move the way you expected, when doors stay closed longer than they should, when you've prayed and waited and nothing seems to change, it's easy to start asking questions. God, did you forget me? Did I do something wrong? But listen carefully. Not every delay means no. Sometimes it just means not yet. And not every loss is punishment. I know the pain of losing something you thought was yours. The confusion, the silence, the sleepless nights where your mind keeps replaying everything, trying to understand what went wrong. But sometimes it's not punishment. Sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's God quietly removing what you couldn't see was not meant to stay. And here's the hard truth. not every person is meant to follow you into your next season. Some people are part of your story, but not your future. They walk with you for a while, they laugh with you, plan with you, even dream with you. But when the time comes, they leave. And it hurts. It really does. But that doesn't mean your story is over. Because in Isaiah 55 verse 8 to 9, God says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts." And that means even when you don't understand what's happening, He does. David was left just days before marriage. Everything he planned, everything he believed was certain, suddenly fell apart. The silence in that moment, the shock, the pain, it was real. But hear this, he was left by a person, but he was never left by God. And sometimes what feels like rejection, that deep, painful rejection that makes you question your worth, is actually redirection. A quiet shift, a divine interruption, a way of leading you away from something towards something better, something you cannot see yet. Because when God is the one writing your story, nothing is wasted. Not the tears, not the heartbreak, not even the moments that almost broke you. Somehow, He takes all of it and turns it into a testimony, a story that will one day make sense, a story that will one day give someone else hope. And what He has prepared for you, no person can take, no mistake can cancel it, no delay can destroy it. It cannot be replaced, only revealed in time.